The homecoming date from hell? Up until junior year of high school, I flew mostly under the social radar and stuck to my status as a nerd girl. But when I was 15, I joined varsity cheer. My school's cheerleaders weren't popular by definition, but everyone kind of knew who you were because we were on the announcements, performed at pep rallies, and generally engaged with the students a lot. I made a lot of friends that year, and some of them happened to be the cool kids. Now, for a while, I thought this was my long-awaited karma payoff for the years of bullying I suffered at their hands. I even developed a crush on one of them, a crush which the junior cheer captain herself volunteered to help me pursue. Homecoming is a big deal from where I am, and I began to fantasize about my crush asking me to go with him. I'd heard rumors he was planning a dramatic proposal, but as homecoming season approached, I became more and more sure I would be his date. The junior cheer captain who was close with him kept dropping hints that I was right. One day at practice, she asked me what my favorite candy was, and I knew it would be my crush giving it to me. You can imagine my surprise when, after an exhausting theater rehearsal, I walked into the parking lot and was confronted by a guy I'd hardly spoken to asking me to be his date. My theater friends all applauded, assuming I was overjoyed. I saw both my parents in the parking lot recording the whole surprise, but most importantly, the cool kids I recently befriended were standing right there behind him, egging him on. I didn't understand why, because he wasn't popular at all. In fact, he was known to be kind of creepy. The junior cheer captain was laughing, encouraging him to give me the box of my favorite candy he was holding on to. She definitely orchestrated the whole thing. I didn't really know the guy, but I didn't want to humiliate him in front of the coolest kids in school, so I faked a smile and rolled with it. I promised myself I'd deny him later in private so he would not be embarrassed. Afterwards, when my parents excitedly asked me how I felt about the whole ordeal, I explained how uncomfortable it made me. I said that I got a creepy, strong vibe from the guy. That didn't fly with my parents. My mother accused me of having expectations too high, and my father demanded me to know if I was secretly a lesbian. To make his case stronger, I just become best friends with the only openly gay girl our school has ever seen. Long story short, I knew if I shut down my date, I'd effectively declare war on my parents. However, I played my dad's protective instincts against him and persuaded him to let me friend zone my date. After all, he knows how high school boys think, right? I texted my date that night and explained I only saw us as friends, but would still happily go to homecoming with him. He was very polite about it, although I could tell he was interested in me romantically. It seemed we reached a deal until the next day at school, when one of my cheerleader friends referred to my date as my boyfriend. I corrected her and told her we're just going to homecoming as friends. She seemed confused and told me that my date was telling anyone who would listen that I was his girlfriend. A few more of my friends approached me with similar comments, and I confronted my date about them. He denied all involvement and suggested it was just a rumor. I reminded him that we were just friends and that I had zero romantic interest in him as a person. He said he understood. I got a call from the junior cheer captain. She pretended to be sweet and then very nice, but I was annoyed that she let me believe my crush would be asking me to homecoming. She began her attempt to persuade me that I was wrong to friend zone my date. She said that she spent many afternoons planning his proposal with him, and she knew he was kind of creepy from afar, but he was sweet and caring underneath. I said if he was such a catch, she should fucking date him. Annoyed, she dropped the sweet act. She told me I had to date him because he liked me so much and he got into so much trouble to ask me to homecoming. I had to give him a chance because he'd gone out on a limb for me. I told her that she was wrong. I didn't have to do anything I didn't want to, and I owed him nothing. I ended up hanging up on her soon after that, but that was just the beginning. Starting the next Monday, he would corner me in the hallway and give me a rose he held in his teeth. He usually did so between my 6th and 7th periods. When my path through the hall crossed his, I was deeply uncomfortable with this and told him so, but he would not stop. I took different routes to escape him, but the junior cheer captain and her posse made a point of tracking me down so he could find me elsewhere. Every time he did this, everyone in the area would treat it as a sweet romantic gesture, despite my obvious discomfort. Wouldn't any girl be so lucky to have a boy be so devoted to her that he gave her a rose every single day? He was telling everyone I was his girlfriend. The final straw for me was when he walked into a class he wasn't in to find me and give me a daily rose. My teacher, who was friends with a junior cheer captain, let this happen. For weeks afterwards, she would ask me about my date every single day. When he came in, I told him to get out and leave me alone. His feelings were clearly hurt, and he left looking like a kicked puppy. My classmates started calling me a cold hard bitch. It didn't matter what I had to say about him. I was the ice queen, refusing this sweet boy's advances. Everyone in school had decided that I was in love with him, and nobody cared what I felt. My crush, who was part of the popular group, joined the junior cheer captain in pressuring me into returning my date's feelings. At every event where the cheerleaders were present, my date would push his way to the front of the crowd. He would go to great lengths to get my attention. At football games, he would wave a flag in the student section, so I look at him when we were cheering. The other girls would make comments about how endearing he was. When he waited in the parking lot by our bus back to school just to hug me and tell me how great I did. I didn't know what else to do other than to let this happen. I only had recently ascended to a position of visibility. If I conflicted too hard with the cool kids who were so dead set on setting me up with this guy, I could be an outsider all over again. I hope that if I just kept ranting to my real friends about how creepy he was and publicly let him to do what he wanted, it would all blow over. My school had a 15-second attention span, so some scandal had to one-up me sooner or later. The truth emerged as usual in the locker room. It turned out the junior cheer captain had been telling him during their afternoons together that I was into the guy. He'd come to help her announcing his crush on me, and she got a step further and convinced him I felt the same despite the fact that I did not even know his freaking name. She lied to him for weeks prior to the homecoming proposal, and when I told her what I was wrong, she just didn't care. She told me that I should be grateful because everybody was starting to think that I was gay. My best friend, the lesbian who was starting a gay revolution, and I, inspired, spread a rumor that we were dating. After all, everyone already thought I was gay, right? But my date wasn't fazed. In fact, he told everyone that he just heard me straight. 3 weeks after he asked me, it was finally homecoming night. Thanks to cheer obligations and a complete coincidence involving a Switch backpack that left me without my dress, I ended up only attending the dance for half an hour. My date awkwardly stood on the side of the room while I danced my heart out to Mr. Brightside. I almost felt bad for him when right at the end, the junior cheer captain appeared like a summoned demon to suggest we slow dance at the next opportunity. Thank God I escaped that one by walking to the DJ and suggesting he play Footloose. My date walked me out to the parking lot to wait for my mom to pick me up. While we waited for her to drive around, which took entirely too long because she still hoped I'd stop making a fuss about him and just date him, he asked me out. I politely declined. He quickly stammered that we should go with like a group of people, like the junior cheer captain and my crush. I denied him again and made it clear we were only friends and that I wasn't interested in romantic endeavors because I was too busy. That was actually true. I was in all advanced classes, varsity theater and cheer, and worked part-time too. A few days later, a teacher eloped to Vegas and nobody cared about my love life anymore. My date and I were distanced again by class and activities and work. It appeared that everything was going back to normal. That Friday at the football game, my crush asked me to sit on his shoulders for the alma mater. Overjoyed, I accepted, and I hoped this was the beginning of a new chapter for me. I ignored the frantically waving flag in the stands. Monday, my date stood on a chair in his second period class and announced that everyone should be wary of my crush because he would steal your girl. I heard everyone buzzing about it a few hours later when someone called me a bitch, again for breaking my date's heart. I knew I was being dramatic, but I decided not to go to lunch that day, terrified of running into him. I'm so glad I didn't. Later, I saw on Snapchat that my date had carved my name into his arm with a pair of scissors. Damn it! His bleeding arm was screenshotted and sent to me half by a dozen people, most of them demanding why I'd hurt him like this. He did it in the middle of lunch in a crowded cafeteria, and somehow no administration noticed or even cared. The school was buzzing. My date was broken-hearted victim, and I was the evil, secretly gay bitch who wouldn't even give him a chance. I got so many dirty looks, man. By fifth period, I was just ready to just walk out, but my good girl instincts kicked in, and I decided to tough it out for 2 more hours. Around that time, I got a panicked text from one of my cheer friends. While she initially been insistent that I date the creepy guy, she had apparently changed her mind after the lunch incident earlier. She told me that my date, who was in her 5th period class, was going off the rails. He had started saying that he wanted to kill himself because I wouldn't love him. This had escalated to saying he'd kill my crush for lying to me and stealing me away. Finally, he started talking about how he knew where I lived, my parents had given him my address, and all that stuff, and he'd make me pay. I knew that after 6th period, our paths through the hall would cross. Since the beginning of this ordeal, the school had cracked down on students getting outside, and my alternate route to escape him was no longer an option. My class was at the far end of the hall with nowhere to go but into the central hub, and he would be coming from the other end of the hallway towards mine. I was stuck up a chimney, basically. Desperate, I texted the junior cheer captain to finish what she started and tell him I was not and had never been interested in him. She made this a mess and she had to clean it up. She said she'd go to the counselor, but she didn't know what else to do. This was way beyond her control now. For the first and only time I skipped class, I hid out in the theater hall and waited for 7th period. I got a few texts during the passing period that my date was waiting for me by the bathrooms. There was a little alcove right there where you can't see people coming around the corner, and the thought of him hiding there and waiting for me to walk by alone just horrified me. Right before 7th period began, a few of my classmates burst in cackling and proclaimed that my date was coming down here after school to kill my crush. They thought this was hilarious, but judging by the look on my crush's face, this wasn't a joke to him anymore. Our teacher brushed this off as typical theater drama, pun fully intended. I watched the clock and tried not to cry, knowing that by the time the bell rang, my date would be outside, waiting for me and my crush to emerge. That day ended up being a work day, so my crush and I were able to escape the classroom and hide out elsewhere in the theater hall to get away from him. He opted for the black box theater, and I went for the lighting closet. Obviously, I didn't witness what happened, but my best friend filled me in afterwards. Allegedly, my date had turned up 3 minutes before the bell rang and stood outside the classroom, where we couldn't see him when we opened the door. He told everyone standing around that he was ready to have a knife fight with my crush. We don't know if he had a knife or not, but the idea that he might was enough to terrify me. His arm was wrapped in paper towels that he was bleeding through. My best friend told him my crush and I were gone, but he didn't believe her. He stood outside for 25 minutes until the administrators began walking through to make sure no one was in the school who shouldn't be. My date wasn't in there, so he wasn't allowed to stick around. That night, I texted him back. Not only would I never date him, but could no longer see a friendship between us. I sent him a number to a suicide hotline and told him to get help. Finally, I told him that he needed to learn what no meant, and I never wanted to speak to him again. He responded that he was sorry and asked if there was anything he could do to fix this. I told him no. I don't think he learned the meaning of the word after all, because the same pattern repeated itself. A few months later on Valentine's Day, the next year at homecoming, senior year Valentine's Day, prom. But those are all other stories. I've since graduated and gone off to a college hundreds of miles away from him. My family back home moved from the address my parents had given him. Contrary to popular belief, I'm not gay. My crush, on the other hand, came out a few months later, and we were friends for the rest of high school. I'm working on handling romantic endeavors in a healthy way, but he got in my head. He was the first person to ever show interest in me. Ironically, the last time I saw him was my first and only homecoming game after graduating. But this time I had true friends to defend me when he predictably tried to pull some weird shit on me again. The whole part, looking back, was somehow being at fault for everything. To this day, people from my high school reference the whole ordeal as, "That time you wouldn't date that poor shy kid." I can't even appreciate red roses anymore. So, homecoming date from hell. Let's not meet again.